Okay, ready to go. Welcome everybody to this virtual council meeting of Norwich City Council. We've made an assumption based on the number of items on the agenda tonight that the meeting will take more than 2 hours. It's therefore suggested that members take a vote to suspend paragraph 16 of Appendix 1 of the Council's Constitution to allow the meeting to run for more than 2 hours. We'll still take a 10-minute break at the appropriate point around the 2-hour mark, and this will probably be once the reports have been considered. Before we take the motions, I will ask if members can indicate whether they are happy for any motions to be taken as unopposed business. This is so we can gauge how much time will be left in the meeting to deal with the motions. Once we approach the 3-hour mark, at a convenient point beforehand, I'll ask if members wish to continue with the meeting. If a majority of members agree, this meeting will continue. If there is not a majority, the meeting will end immediately and the remaining business that has not been taken as unopposed will be considered at the next ordinary meeting of the Council, which will be in June 2021. Can I ask for a proposer to suspend paragraph 16 of Appendix 1 of the Constitution to allow discussion on the business of the meeting to continue for more than 2 hours? Okay, Councillor Stannard, Councillor Waters. And a seconder. Councillor Bergline. We'll put the matter to the vote. All those against? It's good to see you're not tired yet. Abstentions? In favour? Okay, thank you, that's carried. This meeting is being held under the Local Authorities and Police and Crime Panels Coronavirus Flexibility of Local Authorities and Police and Crime Panel Meetings, England and Wales, Regulations 2020, meaning that decisions made will have the same validity as those made at a meeting held in City Hall. We have elected members of the Council attending the meeting. We also have the Council's monitoring officer as part of the meeting, as well as Democratic Services staff to record the votes. Members must be able to hear and, where practical, see other members. Therefore, we ask all members to keep their video on during the business of the meeting. A recording of this meeting will appear on the Council's YouTube channel and the meeting will be live streamed. If we are notified that this link is not working, we'll take a short adjournment while the issue is resolved. Can I ask participants to ensure that they are muted when they are not speaking, or you may be muted by an officer to maintain audio quality. The chat function is enabled for members to report technical difficulties and to indicate that they would like to speak on an item, but you will only be able to message the chair and Democratic Services. If you wish to speak on an item, please use the chat function to indicate during the item. Please do not indicate via chat for future items. Voting will be done by exception. This means that I will ask for votes against, then abstentions, and the remainder of the members present will therefore be voting in favour, although I will ask you to raise your hand in favour. I ask that at the appropriate time, you raise your hand clearly in front of your screen and keep it there until we move to the next part of the vote. Please bear with us while we count the votes, as this may take a little longer than usual, as officers check between screens to ensure all members have been seen. Okay, I've received apologies from Councillor Davies, and as part of the Lord Mayor's announcements, there's only a couple. I attended the Strong Roots AGM last week, and also met with the John Lewis Partnership. Only those two things. Now I'd like to invite Councillor Patrick Manning to say a few words about former Councillor and Lord Mayor of Norwich, Keith Radcliffe, who sadly passed away recently, and then Councillor Waters will say a few words about former Councillor Harriet Panting, who sadly passed away recently.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Readers of the Evening News will have seen a very nice full-page piece last Wednesday about Keith Radcliffe, our former Lord Mayor and Labour City Councillor for Lakenham Ward, who has recently passed away. There are 3 great pictures of Keith as a younger man, taken in his year as Lord Mayor, which I'm sure brought fond memories to those who knew him at the time. The article's headline described Keith in the same terms used in a conversation I had with last week with one of his daughters, Julia. Keith was a very modest man. It's an appropriate description and matches my recollection of him, but Keith had no reason to be modest at all. I first met Keith in May 2010. Like other active members of the Lakenham branch, my knowing him meant seeing him more or less monthly at branch meetings over the next 9 years or so, and in some years more or less daily in what all of us here know to be that busy March to May period when election campaigning gets into full swing. When canvassing and leafleting got underway, and we would head off into the ward in pairs each weekday evening and most Saturdays, Keith was often my companion on the campaign trail. He was 73 when this began for me, and as the Evening News article explained, he had by then a lifetime of distinguished service behind him. But he was not someone to trumpet his achievements, and it was only slowly over the course of getting to know Keith in these campaigns and meetings that I came to know much about any of that. As I said, Keith was as much distinguished by modesty as he was by his dedication to public service. Whilst canvassing and leafleting, or when he'd given me a lift to and from those sessions, Keith and I would talk about current affairs and politics and our families, but rarely did Keith let slip many details of the path his life had taken. After a while, I learned that he'd been a counsellor. A while later, that he'd worked for many years and at high levels in education, and then that he'd been Lord Mayor. And later still, when I found it hard to keep count and asked just how many children he had, that Keith had no less than 5 daughters, about whom, like his grandchildren, he'd always speak warmly and with pride. So it's with his natural reserve in mind that in learning more about Keith's life since his passing, I find myself not at all surprised that he had an awful lot more to be proud of still. Keith's life was given to public service. It took 2 main forms of expression, education and local politics, and in both he showed complete devotion. His love of learning was sparked at a very early age. Indeed, he had something of a deep-end introduction at his primary school's fair when his father bought him a book about history from a second-hand store. A love of that subject sparked there and then, Keith going on to become a modern history graduate from Durham University. And staying in Durham between 1961 and 67, Keith took a diploma and then a master's in education, becoming a history teacher in secondary and further education for 8 years before moving into the administration of education, first taking a job with the London Borough of Waltham Forest, and then conducting 2 periods as Deputy Director for Education, one in Northumberland, which saw his return to the northeast, and then back south with the London Borough of Enfield. Clearly a man with talent to be exploited in this chosen field, Keith was just 44 when he became Director of Education for Redbridge. He held that position for 12 years before taking early retirement and coming to Norwich aged 56. But these titles give only a flavour of Keith's dedication to education, for these were years peppered with distinguished posts and appointments. He was Secretary of the Association of London Chief Education Officers from 1985, a board member of the London Examinations and Assessments Council from 1989, and he became a council member of the Business and Technology Education Council in 1990, a role bestowed by no less than the Secretary of State. All through that time, his personal love of history stayed with him and well into retirement, when Tibet and its culture became a particular topic of interest. Not one to pursue his interests by half, Keith became a supporter of the Tibet Society and of the Tibet Relief Fund. So it's no overstatement to say that Keith's time in education saw him make great contributions to regions across the country. After leaving education, Keith's dedication to public service was expressed through local politics. This saw focus at a more local level, but his contributions were no less remarkable. Already a long-standing member of the Labour Party, Keith quickly became involved with politics in his adopted fine city. The speech he made about the state of education at one of the first all-members meetings he attended was especially well received, and word was sent to Lakenham that Keith was someone who should be encouraged to get involved more deeply still. And get involved he did. He stood for election to the City Council in 1996, just 2 years after arrival in Norwich, and was duly elected, and served for 6 years in all, including a year as Lord Mayor in 2001 to 2002. I recall Keith's prescience telling me at a branch meeting one evening when I was a new member that in Lakenham members often found themselves becoming more deeply involved than they might have imagined, or possibly even wanted. But with role models like Keith in the branch, it was hard not to see his logic. He certainly spoke from personal experience. In the northeast, Keith had been vice chair of the Sedgefield CLP, and here he held a series of branch posts too. He'd been secretary when I joined, and I soon became accustomed, like other ward members, to receiving regular hand-delivered meeting notices and minutes, all of them in pristine white envelopes bearing Keith's inimitable manuscript style. And incidentally, Keith's prediction of deeper involvement soon came to pass. I was always welcomed by him and Joan, his wife, when as branch treasurer, I found myself having to bother them home for signatures on branch cheques. Those visits were ever inconvenient. Keith never let it show. His input into local political life meant that he stayed busy into retirement, but it didn't hold him back from a continued promotion of education generally. As with politics, it wasn't long after arrival in Norwich that his talents in education were put to good use. He became a governor of a number of schools, of Toverham High School for 21 years, of Lakenham First School for 8 years, including a year as chair, and of the Cllr Primary School for 3 years. In all, another 2 decades plus of public service. Keeping in touch with further education, Keith also held governorships at the City College and at the UEA, but even this list of positions doesn't quite cover his devotion. He was always also a director of Tiebreak, a charity promoting education through theatre. Clearly, Keith believed that life could and should be better for youngsters and for society generally, and that he had a role to play. And his own history leaves a host of organisations who will be saddened to hear of his passing. A sense of loss is certainly felt keenly amongst friends and colleagues here in Lakenham. I mentioned Keith's wife, Joan, earlier, and in ending this reflection on Keith's time in Lakenham, I should probably switch to describing not just Keith himself, but Keith and Joan instead. For here in the ward, they were a genuine pair, inseparable. One was rarely mentioned without the other, be it in word or print. Fate brought them together. They first met as colleagues at a further education college in Middlesbrough in the 1960s before Keith moved to a position elsewhere in the country. Many years later, in the early 80s, when both had been widowed, Joan had happened to see Keith's name in a local paper. She contacted him to suggest meeting for lunch to discuss education in the area. Apparently, they didn't get round to having that discussion that day, but they were married the following year. Until prevented by frailty, Keith and Joan always came to branch meetings together. Selection meetings without fail would see them both attend and ask questions. Keith would offer his support to candidates, but would test them too with his questions. Food and drink prizes were never given at branch Christmas parties, but had there been one for most generous contributors, Keith and Joan would surely have won them year on year. It was apparent to ward members in later years that Keith was still strongly motivated by a sense of duty to his party and to his neighbourhood. He canvassed and campaigned well beyond the point at which others might have stopped. Wind and rain would never bother him. We will remember Keith in different ways. My own mind's eye image will be of him out canvassing. Laden with leaflets, pen and clipboard, Keith is on the doorstep of a Lakenham household, a few doors along from whichever doorstep I'm on, and still engaging with residents in 2019 with the same delicacy, enthusiasm and politeness I'd first seen in 2010. Keith was born in Harrow to Agnes and George Ratcliffe in 1937 and died in Norwich on the 19th of February 2021. Thank you, Lorna.
Thank you. Councillor Waters.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Now, Harriet was elected as a Labour councillor to Henderson Ward in 1995, and in that year winning by a huge margin of 72.8% of the vote. She went on to become a county councillor for that ward and then subsequently Wensum Ward in 2005, and she finally retired in 2009 and left the city soon after moving to London. She'd moved to North Earlham at the heart of the ward earlier in the decade with her husband, who was the local vicar, and both of them were true Christian socialists, and that's a noble tradition which is part of the broad Labour family. They threw themselves into the practical application of their faith and the care of their constituents. And I have to say that Harriet was the most tireless of ward councillors, living at the very heart of the community she represented. I have to say that she was not just focused on the day-to-day support for the communities, for individuals. She had a strategic eye as well, making sure that resources came into the area that she lived in and the area she represented. So she was very closely involved in helping to secure £30 million in the New Deal for Communities funding for North Earlham when the new Labour government was elected in 1997. She got involved in the development of the Cllr Starts centres built in North Earlham. And she worked very hard to make sure that schools and community facilities, policing, fire station, housing upgrades were all implemented in a way that was going to provide very good public services. She had a sense that people had been deprived of the things that they'd been entitled to under 18 years of a Conservative government, and she was determined to make sure that those rights and those resources were restored. I talked to Janet Sillett, who was leader of Norwich City Council and a long-serving member of the local authority, and who worked very closely with Harriet. The committee rooms were always at the vicarage. Janet says that election days were made bearable by good quality homemade biscuits and sandwiches. And really, the job she took on was very much 24/7. And she is still remembered today with fondness and affection in the ward that she represented. And I have very fond memories of her absolute commitment, her enthusiasm, her generosity and kindness. And I think she set the standard for what a community councillor should be and should do. She changed many lives. I remember her fondly, and communities and people that she touched lives of remember her with an equal fondness and regard. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. We'll take a minute's silence and ask councillors, please ensure that your microphones are on mute for 1 minute's silence. Thank you. As this is the last meeting before the election, I would now like to ask Councillor Waters to say a few words regarding Councillor Roger Ryan and Councillor James Samizi, who are standing down.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. The first thing I need to do is to thank both Jane and Roger for staying on an extra year. They had intended to leave last May, but as we know, the pandemic meant that no by-elections could be had. And I'm particularly grateful to both of them for how conscientiously and committed they remained over that second year that they had not anticipated serving. So I think we all appreciate that. Jane, if I can start with Jane, has been a councillor for a short time, but in the 2 years she has been a councillor, she has really added great value to the deliberations of this council through her committee work and her interest in the council and her constituents. And she's provided many helpful insights from her professional background. And she's also made a contribution to work of planning committee in particular. I know she's been very enthusiastic about that work, and other committees like the scrutiny committee. So thank you very much, Jane, for your contribution. It's been much appreciated. Roger has served 2 terms, joining the council in 2014. And Roger's service, and I've worked very, very closely with Roger, has been a cabinet member. He is instrumental in one of our most important policies, which is to develop and respond to the rising popularity of tennis in the city, and the fruits of his labours will materialise during the course of the year with new tennis facilities in Hyam Park, Lakenham, among other places. So that's a great legacy. Very good cabinet colleague, but also somebody who served with distinction as Deputy Lord Mayor, and was also our lead on the scrutiny committee. So thank you very much for your contribution over that period of time. It's been much valued, and again, thank you to both of you for staying the extra year and continuing to make a strong and sustained contribution to the work of the council.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. I'd now like to invite Councillor Bergelein to say a few words regarding Councillor Paul Neal, who is also standing down.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I have the pleasure of saying a few words about Councillor Paul Neal, who will be stepping down from his City Council seat at the May election. Now, Paul is obviously not really stepping down. He's very much hoping to step up and become a Green County Councillor for Nelson Ward. And I'm sure we can all join to wish him good luck in this endeavour. Paul is brilliant, and it is so easy to see why residents and colleagues love him. When the pandemic hit, he did not hesitate once and signed up to volunteer his time at the food bank to support others. He has really flourished in his role as the shadow housing portfolio holder, and Gail will know that he's a well of knowledge about sustainable housing and the housing market, but he doesn't stop and takes part in seminars and courses to ever further his knowledge about the latest approaches and technologies. He has a vision and ambition for this council that would see us being a market leader in sustainable housing, and he has pushed for this vision throughout his entire time as a councillor. Paul is also a brilliant ward councillor. If he thinks that residents are being treated unfairly, he does not let go and will persist with a piece of casework until it is resolved. And people love to talk to him because we all know how easy he is to talk to. Though he might try and sell you a double glazed window during a casual conversation about the weather, you never know. I can honestly say that 50% of advice on how to be an adult, starting with mortgages and ending with taxes, I get from Paul. The biggest compliment for Paul is probably his gorgeous wife, and it was amazing to see how much he supported her while she was working endless hours as a nurse during the pandemic. Paul, we're very sad to see you go, but entirely confident that this is not the last we have heard of you in Norwich politics.
Thank you, Councillor Bergelein. I'd now like to invite Councillor Wright to say a few words about his colleagues standing down.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to begin by offering my thanks to Councillor Jane Sarmezi for her contribution to the Scrutiny Committee in the couple of years that she's been a councillor. Shortly after getting elected in 2019 and joining the committee, Jane took on board the role as a rep of the Scrutiny Committee to the Norfolk Health Overview Scrutiny Committee, a role that she carried out with distinction. I'd like to thank her for that. Councillor Ryan has been an invaluable vice chair to me as chair of Scrutiny Committee, providing much needed support and ensuring a good pace of a meeting, I think. And Councillor Neal, I've served as Paul's vice chair on the audit committee many years ago now, and Paul will certainly be missed as a city councillor. Always a friendly face, including when bumping into him in London on one of the many pro-European demos that we were able to be on. So good luck with your future, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wright. Item 2, declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest to make on any items on the agenda? I can't see any. Okay. Right, item 3.
Including bumping into him in London on one of the many pro-European demos that we were able to be on. So good luck with that.
Sorry.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Okay.
Sorry, can I ask the members of the public to turn the YouTube link off, because I think it's causing a delay.
Okay. Right, now we'll go to item 3. Questions from the public. There are 2 questions which have been received. The first question is from Mr. Stephen O'Connor. Mr. O'Connor, would you please ask your question? 3 minutes. Sorry? Oh, you're on mute, Mr. O'Connor.
Apologies. Sorry, thank you for inviting me today. I'm a leaseholder and resident of Goodman Square in Mancroft Ward. We've had numerous issues with antisocial behaviour in the access stairwell to the block. This includes people using drugs and defecating in and under the stairwell, leaving behind used needles, sharp objects and excrement. On occasions, myself and my partner and other members of the block have had to pass drug users with needles hanging out their arms to get to our homes. We call the police, but they are gone by the time they arrive, and as such, the police do not do anything about this situation. Not only is the door not secure, but it also will not close automatically, making it not an operational fire door. My partner, who's a full-time firefighter, finds this extremely concerning. I and my fellow block residents have petitioned the council and the police via letter, phone calls, and repair requests, and nothing has been done to resolve the situation. I haven't even had an acknowledgement of my letter that the council has received any letters. I understand that the council will be looking at drawing up a new programme of secure entry systems for blocks and flats soon. Can the leader of the council give me his promise that Goodman Square will be included in this list so that a safe environment can be created for my family and other residents of the block? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Connor. Councillor Harris, would you like to give your reply?
Thank you very much for your question, Mr. O'Connor. We are very aware of the high importance of the safety and security of our residents, and we do receive inquiries and representations regarding door access installations in flats and neighbourhoods that currently do not have these systems. We advise all residents to continue to report any antisocial behaviour or criminal activity, as these reports help Norwich City Council and Norfolk Police identify any hotspots and make any necessary recommendations, prioritise actions and give appropriate advice and support. When reviewing and prioritising the need for the installation of door entry systems, these reports are also looked at and taken into consideration. I confirm that in addition to completing our upgrade programme on flats with existing systems, we are planning on an installation programme for a new door entry systems across the city from the 1st of April 2022 onwards. This is a complex and lengthy project that involves many processes such as consultations with residents and leaseholders, obtaining planning consent, contract tendering and award before manufacture and installation. I can confirm that Goodman Square is included as a high priority in that programme. Unfortunately, without your address, I am unable to investigate the repair that you mentioned, but would be more than happy to investigate that for you if you could provide me with your address outside of this meeting. But I must ask you and any other residents to continue to use the website or contact the council's contact centre team to report any repairs that are required to the block front door in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Mr. O'Connor, you're allowed one supplementary question. Do you have a supplementary question?
No supplementary question. Thank you very much, council members.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Connor. We have another question from Ms. Ash Haynes. Ms. Haynes, would you please ask your question?
Hi. Yes, at the Cabinet meeting on the 10th of February, contracts were awarded for domestic gas heating upgrading of council dwellings. As gas boilers won't be installed in any newly built homes from 2025, and instead use low carbon energy sources that will save some residents money and help in the necessary shift away from fossil fuels in this climate emergency, would now not be a good time for the council to replace at least some of the gas boilers with alternatives, including air source heat pumps, electric heaters, and solar powered heating systems?
Thank you. Councillor Harris, would you please give me your reply?
Thank you very much. And thank you for your question. The Council has set an ambitious programme of measures to tackle and mitigate climate change and move towards carbon neutrality. We are investing considerable resources into low carbon resources. Our strategy with our council properties is two-pronged to ensure not only that we minimise fossil fuel use, but also that our homes are affordable to rent and to run. We have a significant programme of capital and revenue work to help thermal efficiency, such as loft and wall insulation and window replacements. Our existing gas boilers are up to 95% fuel efficient and have significant life left in most of them, so our focus will be on future installations, learning from other councils and technological advances from around the world. Currently, we're investigating and implementing a range of measures, including heating sourced from the city's river, its soil and the air. We have and will continue to invest in PV panels and thermodynamic heating. Of course, there's always more to do, and we will continue to maximise opportunities to use low carbon energy sources that will save residents money and help in the necessary shift away from fossil fuels in this climate emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Ms. Haynes, you're allowed one supplementary question. Do you have a supplementary question?
Children, sorry. I totally accept the focus is on future installation rather than going backwards to other ones. But don't you think it will cost the council more money in the long run, as well as be worse for the planet in the long run and the residents, if we don't start to make changes now, rather than panicking at the time when we suddenly have to make these changes, you know?
Thank you. Councillor Harris, would you please give your reply?
Yes, thank you. I would hope that we would never be in a state of panic about this. So officers are always looking for opportunities, and we are taking on board as many different technological answers as we can. So at the moment, we have to concentrate on what we can do. It's a lot easier to do things in new build and in renovation projects, but that doesn't mean to say that we aren't looking to the future. And that's why we do things like the thermodynamic hot water systems.
Thank you. Thank you for attending the meeting tonight, Mr. O'Connor and Ms. Haynes. Officers will remove you from the meeting now. You're welcome to watch the remainder of the meeting on the Council's YouTube channel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, next item is petitions. There have been no petitions received for this meeting. So we're on to item 4, the minutes. I call upon Councillor Waters to move the minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of February 2021.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Formally moved.
Thank you. I call upon Councillor Bergline to second the minutes.
Formally seconded.
Thank you. We'll now move to the vote. All those against? No. Abstentions? Okay. All those in favour? Okay, that's carried. We have an item 5. Women's safety in Norwich. I've used my discretion as chair of this meeting to add an additional item to the agenda this evening. I would like to invite group spokespersons in the first instance to make statements about women's safety in Norwich following the extremely sad news about Sarah Everard. Once group spokespersons have spoken, I will ask if any other councillors wish to speak on this item. I call upon Councillor Harris to speak.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Before I begin, I would just like to highlight that this is a space for all women councillors to contribute, and this is done with the support of all our fellow male councillors. So thank you for everyone's support on this. I wanted to speak tonight in order to remember Sarah Everard, a young woman murdered at the hands of a man and discarded in Woodland. Another woman dead, but this cannot be just another statistic. Enough is enough. We need to ask ourselves as a society as to why such violent attacks happen again and again and again. Murder, rape and domestic violence, Lord Mayor, it is getting worse, not better. Just why do we accept this? Perhaps the answer lays in the lived experiences of all women, but we need to fight back. We must demand to have our voices heard, and we must stand together and share our experiences. So I shall give some of my story and thoughts as part of this discussion. For me, it starts with the individual, about how we live as individuals in a wider society and a wider world. Growing up in Norwich in a working class community in the 1950s, I was always aware of how unequal the society I lived within was for women like me. How certain men could make sexist comments, touch women, behave inappropriately, and yet live and indeed prosper with seeming impunity. How opportunities afforded to men were something I could dream of. I still to this day remember a family member, on hearing that I'd passed the 11 plus to secure a place at a grammar school, with the opportunity that would give me, commented, "Why waste the money on the uniform? She is only a girl." That comment has stayed with me all of my life, and I'm grateful that my parents were forward enough thinking to give me the opportunity that they knew I should have. If you live in such a world, it is so easy to become conditioned by it and almost unknowingly even begin to accept it. The same things happened in the workplace. The touching, the inappropriate comments. I would like to think that it wouldn't happen now. Please don't say, well, you should have just gone and done something about it, without understanding the dynamics of the time. Gender discrimination and the appalling attitudes which existed in so many workplaces, leading to a woman fearing for their job. Perhaps that's what encouraged me to be a union rep many years later. So thinking of the individual, we need men to think about their role in society. Whether we like it or not, they have power and influence, but this needs to be used in a positive way. The importance of family relationships, the importance of them being a positive role model for their children, and their role in the workplace. We also need to think about society. We are conditioned by the opportunities society chooses to afford us and the security it chooses to give us. Also, let's be honest, and I am happy to say it loud and clear, and I try to reframe this phase, but parts of society simply stink at the moment. When those in power choose willingly to destroy the services we use and need, there is a consequence to it. When the Tories embarked on austerity, they also launched an attack on the rights and institutions and the very laws which should serve to protect us and empower us to reach our full potential. There is a price to pay for it. So over 10 years ago, when the street lights got turned off by Norfolk County Council to provide savings, they are savings that are paid for by women like myself when we walk home alone at night through dark streets. My fare is supposedly a price worth paying. I know that in the evening I choose different routes to avoid dark, isolated areas, and that indeed on occasion I've simply fled when faced with a man approaching and trying to talk to me. When you destroy the probation service, slash funding for domestic abuse refuges, cut the police and the specialist officers who investigate crimes against people, often women, you need to expect the consequences. When you cut the funding for schools so that the learning environment allows for less time to teach children about life and how to respect each other, expect a consequence. When you reduce women to poverty to use food banks, to not have money to feed their hungry children, expect consequences. I could go on and on. There is fear and hardship coursing through our society, and it didn't just happen by accident. It wasn't just some chance of fate. It was the consequence of decisions taken by those who should have known better. They decided that the world we live in today was just good enough for the likes of us. One rule for them, one rule for us. Lastly, we need to think global. We need to think how women are treated in the world that we all share. That starts by not electing men like Trump with his complete disrespect for women. It means changing power of a resource and who gets to use it and which priorities are made. It means thinking and acting about how we protect all women and girls in the world so that one day the world itself will be a better place for women and men too. Here locally, I know that this council does much to help. It does that because we care and we prioritise it. We can always do more, and with strong partners, we will always aim to do more. But tonight, let's just stop for a moment and think of Sarah. Let's take time to think about the family and friends she has left behind, and in solidarity, send our love to them. Each of us in our different ways can keep on building a better city, a better country, and indeed a better world. It will be a foolish person who underestimates the power of women standing together. We will be heard. I'd have to admit there were a few tears in the writing of this speech, and I know that many of my fellow councillors will have much to add to my few words. Despite the horror of the recent weeks, I'm still hopeful of a better world, and Lord Mayor, I'm more determined than ever to help shape it for the better. Lord Mayor, thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harris. I'd like to call on Councillor Youssef to speak.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. On behalf of the Green Group on Norwich City Council, I offer our deepest condolences to the friends and family of Sarah Everard. All women should be able to walk home at night and live their lives at all times without fear of violence, intimidation, and misogynistic abuse. Male violence against women has to end, and to do so we need urgent political, social, and cultural change. We're in the midst of a domestic violence crisis. On average, every 3 days, a woman is killed by a man. This is a systemic issue. Ingrained misogyny in our society is fueling violence against women and girls. Women have been failed at every level of society, economically, politically, and within the media and the judicial system. It's essential, too, that we remember this is inherently an intersectional fight. We need to show solidarity with all women, including women of colour, LGBTQA+, women, and migrants who face appalling levels of double discrimination. In horror, we have watched the shocking scenes unfolding on Saturday night in Clapham, London, as the Metropolitan Police clashed with peaceful protesters mourning Sarah's murder. Protesters were brutally restrained and manhandled by members of the police force. What is even more alarming about this tragedy was that it was possibly committed by a serving police officer. The incident is the latest in a history of systemic police violence against marginalised groups, and once again unequivocally demonstrates the need for radical changes within the UK police force. We've heard today that the government plans to have plainclothes policemen patrol nighttime venues to protect women, but this does nothing to dismantle the systems of oppression that have created this crisis that we're in, nor will it do anything to help the huge number of women who are assaulted in other places, most notably in their own homes by people they thought they could trust. Violence against a woman robs her of her control that she has over her own body, which is a frightening and very damaging experience. This is often extenuated by the current judicial process. As of today, 80% of women report being sexually assaulted, but of those, 90% of them say they will never report it to the police, as they do not believe it will be followed up. Those who do report their crimes are often met with disbelief, disinterest, and shame at best. We all have a responsibility to listen to people's experiences without questioning them or finding excuses or explanations for the abuse. One way in which we could see the police take more action on these issues were if misogyny were to be labelled a hate crime. This would compel police to record instances of violence against women accurately and radically reform how the judicial system treats domestic violence with victims. I hope to see Norfolk Police leading the way in implementing this. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I'd like to call upon Councillor Ackroyd to speak.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Since Sarah Everard's tragic death, there's been a huge outpouring of grief for a young woman who was simply walking home. I can only begin to try to imagine the anguish felt by her family to lose their beloved child and sister, and for her friends in this terrible way. Sarah's murder has shocked the nation, but has made us think what this means more widely for us as a society. In the last 10 years, 1,500 women have been murdered in the UK. That's roughly 1 every 3 days. We all have stories we can tell, Even as an older woman, if I'm alone and I hear footsteps behind me, I cross the street. I hold my keys in my hand in case I need them. I walk in the middle of the road. I don't park in multi-storey car parks at night. I turned down a free ticket offered to me at one of our theatres simply because I didn't want to walk back through Norwich on my own to get the bus or find my car. Women constantly get given advice on how to stay safe, making sure we don't go out alone in the dark. And if we do, we stick to well-lit streets, to text when we leave and arrive safely, to wear bright clothing. If we're not careful, this leads to a society that lays blame for many incidents at the door of women, which does the very opposite of keeping us safe. The advice also suggests that women are safe at home, but many are not. We know that since the COVID-19 lockdown a year ago, domestic abuse homicides have doubled. We do not need men to keep us safe or protect us. We need men to stop being violent. Many women are rallying around the powerful campaign to reclaim the streets, which is essentially about getting our liberty back. In a society dogged with an unchallenged and largely ignored acceptance that women are not safe, women are not truly free. The handling of the vigil at Clapham Common was heavy-handed and wholly unacceptable, especially given the public outpouring of support for such vigils and their importance for women who need their message to be heard loud and clear. What happened on Saturday night was completely avoidable and risks distracting from the very reason those women were there. In the background to current events is the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill. It's wide-ranging. Liberty has warned the bill risks stifling dissent, criminalising gypsy and traveller communities, and subjecting marginalised communities to profiling and even more disproportionate policing. We are still in a pandemic, but that shouldn't be an excuse to increase authoritarianism. It shouldn't be an excuse to prevent people expressing their anger, their fears after the death of yet another woman who was doing what she should have been able to do with confidence every day. To hold a vigil for a young woman who was trying to live life as it should be lived, without fear. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to call on any other councillors who wish to speak on this item. Any others? Councillor Shamisi.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to Councillors Harris and Councillor Ackroyd and to Councillor Youssef for what they've said. I think it's really important that we have this opportunity to mourn and commemorate what's happened to this particular young woman recently. Unfortunately, as we've heard there, that statistic twice, every 3 days, one woman gets killed by a man, and usually a man who they know, a man in their life. This wasn't necessarily a man who this particular young woman knew. It's not just about the murders, though, is it? I mean, I was really interested to hear what Councillor Harris had to say. The attitudes towards girls and women compared to boys and men. The idea that women have to edit their behaviour. That's the word that's coming out all the time now in the media that I'm reading and listening to. That women are expected to change their behaviours, walk in the middle of the road, hold a key, carry a rape alarm, not go to the theatre. Why are we out after dark? You know, those are the kinds of attitudes. And then there's the more direct harassment that goes on day to day. You ask any woman or girl, even young girls or young teenagers, and they will tell you that even at school, boys can dominate the space, they can be sexually harass them, and girls are having to internalise this at a very early age, that this is their place in life. Their place in life is to accept what boys and men are doing as the norm. And I think, you know, it really is important that we start thinking about who should be editing their behaviours. And I think we all have to think about our own behaviours. Obviously we do. But I think the evidence is so clear. And this particular incident, this particular event has really, really brought it home. One of the things I was reading on the media just before we had this meeting was about women's refuges. women's refuges sprang up in the 1970s. I remember Erin Pizzey, I think she was called, back in the day, I think somewhere like Twickenham or somewhere in West London, not far from where I grew up at that time. I was living as a child. And she was almost a figure of fun on the media at the time. You know, she was almost sort of paraded in the media as somebody who was a bit weird, a bit strange. And basically these women started to take over buildings because there was no government money, there was no funding from any government of any complexion, as far as I can tell, to actually take seriously the kind of violence that women met in their own homes. And I read on the internet just before we came into this meeting that the domestic abuse bill doesn't even mention women's refuges. I mean, you know, I think it's the whole spectrum of behaviours. It's the day-to-day navigation and negotiation of safety and just for the freedom, just the right to be, you know, to be or not to be. In Sarah Everard's case, unfortunately, we know what the answer was. I'll leave it there because I'm sure others want to speak as well, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Scamisi. Any other councillors wish to speak? Karen Erin Fulton McAllister and Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. All of us have stories, not just one or two, but lots. For most of us, there's a few big ones where we're grateful to have got away, knowing we're far luckier than many, including Sarah. But tens, hundreds, if not thousands of smaller ones that we don't even notice often until we start to think about them and think about how we do behave differently for the men around us, how we do things instinctively that would never occur to the men that we know and love. And they start to happen from when we're children. It starts often around puberty, if not before that, with little things like the pinging of bra straps that starts to normalise those behaviours. The main thing, I don't want to go into more of those stories of my own. We've been here so many times, and actually the main thing I want to highlight is that I'm tired. I'm really tired of having these same conversations on repeat. It seems that we do it every year or every couple of years, where the only things that change and the only things that are new this time are the names of the latest victims. This time, there's the woman whose name has brought the topic back into the news, Sarah Everard, but so many others whose stories haven't made the headlines. One example very recently is Blessing Olusegun, who I want to highlight because actually her story was very similar to Sarah's. She, last autumn, she went missing, was on the phone to her boyfriend, lost contact and was a couple of days later found dead in the woodland. Her death has been ruled to be non-suspicious. There is no police investigation for her. And actually, I think this really highlights something that we need to be very conscious of in these discussions, that a white woman has made the news again, quite rightly, but a black woman whose story has such striking similarities, her name has not been heard by most people. And it really just highlights again the importance of ensuring an intersectional response to these sorts of tragedies that acknowledges the additional difficulties that women who are not white and middle class face in even getting recognition, never mind justice. So while, as I say, there is nothing that has been said in the last week that hasn't been said before, we need something to actually change. And it's right that we are listening to women right now. I think I'm very grateful to our brothers in the council to have given us this opportunity to speak. It's them, it's the men who have to step up. It's their behaviour that needs to change. We've been changing our behaviour forever, and enough is enough. We need men to look at themselves, change their own behaviour and hold each other to account. So please, to the men in this room who are good men for the most part, as far as I know nothing about any of you to suggest otherwise, but it's on each of you still to be aware, and to anyone watching this, to you as well, please be aware of who is around you and how your likely being perceived by the women around you, even though you don't think that you're a threat. Don't take things personally. Of course, we know that it's not all men, but we don't know which men it is, and therefore we have to be suspicious of everybody, because there's no other way to keep ourselves safe. Keep your distance, cross the road if you're walking behind a woman, to make sure that you're doing what you can to stop them feeling uncomfortable. Don't forget, it's often the men that we know and trust who end up hurting and even killing us. So even in our closest relationships, our reactions might not always be the way that you might react, because we have additional things to consider. Most importantly, please hold each other to account in the big things and the little things, because it does start with the little things. Don't laugh at friends' sexist jokes. Laughing is an endorsement of those jokes. So if you feel you can do nothing else, please consciously don't laugh. If you feel you can speak up, do speak up. Challenge sexist statements where you hear them. Be an active bystander. If you see a man making a woman uncomfortable, insert yourself into that situation. Ask if she's okay, or distract him, talk to him, tell him you like his hat, you like his beard, whatever it is, to make yourself the point of attention, to give her an opportunity to get away. There's so many things you can be doing, and actually it's up to you to start doing those things, and do what you can. Please realize it's up to you, and help us, because we need it. We need you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to call Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think if one thing this tragedy has brought to our attention is the stories that too many of our friends have. The statistics that are quoted at us by government or by the police don't come close to the experiences of the women we know. And I don't think I have a friend without a story that has come up through this. And it is those statistics, they're real people. And we could go through story by story. And I think that the silent vigils, what was in Chapelfield, sums it up better to me than any words, because it's too difficult to put into words. And I think it's that words are what matters. And that is, as Councillor Harris has said, it's about language that's used. It's about a world where Trump was acceptable. And actually, those words matter. And that's about holding each and every person around us to account for the words they use. And I think it's about having an environment where each woman has a voice. And that's the only way it's going to change. But unfortunately, society makes that really, really difficult, particularly in politics. From my own experience in 2019, when a woman decides that they're going to put their head above a parapet, the gendered, aggressive language that you face is terrifying. And if we can't have a voice, if we can't play a part in the process, then I think it's going to be a lot harder to change. So I hope we can support one another and continue to have a voice.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm coming from a fairly different type of domestic abuse. I was always quite brainy when I was younger, and I passed to go to the grammar school a year early. But from the day I went, I knew that I wouldn't be able to go to university or anything. So I did what I could. And in those days, the main aim was to get married. That was, and have children. when I found out I couldn't have children, I had been married for some time, and I was married to a policeman. And he worked on the Moors murders and the Yorkshire Ripper. And my life was hell because he was trying to protect me all the time. And he wanted to follow, and I had no freedom. We didn't argue, there was no violence, but I had to deal with a man who came home because he'd been listening to what the Yorkshire Ripper had done to the women, waking up screaming during the night. And I couldn't take it anymore. We did actually eventually split up. But don't feel sorry for me. I've been okay ever since. But I often wondered what happened to him, because he didn't realise what he was putting on me. So I couldn't blame him for it. But he did see some terrible, terrible things that men had done to women. And I always say to women, that's one of the reasons I campaigned to keep the lights on in the city all those years ago. But it grieves me to see that we haven't moved on, and this is still happening to women. And I just want everybody to take care of themselves and watch out for the women around you. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Maxwell. Councillor McCartney-Gray.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I was actually going to cover quite a number of points that have already been covered. I feel so fed up that yet again we are mourning yet another young woman in same circumstances that we have since my parents said to me when I went away to stay safe, don't do this, don't do that, don't wear a short skirt. I was 19, I was always going to wear short skirts. I thought I was a bee's knees, but that's not the point. The point is that I guess one of the things that I was discussing with my mother the other day, and she just said, well, why are we not educating our sons to treat women with respect? Why are we not saying to them, what would you do if this was your sister, your cousin, your aunt? That's all I really have to say. And, you know, maybe in the 21st century, we will see some change going forward. But I guess my cynicism is still there. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, everybody, for this moment of solidarity. And especially thank you to the people who've raised the issue of race. I've always maintained that hate is on the part of the person who's doing the hating, often by dehumanizing the way that they value or rather don't value the other person for whatever reason. But when half of the world, maybe more than half of the world, is seeing one half of us as lesser people, what do we expect? You know, these horrendous incidents are tip of the iceberg stuff. For every major incident, there will be several smaller ones building up to it, because abuse is not an event, it's a pattern. It's a pattern built on entitlement, because if you're a white man, the history books are full of people like you. The films are full of people like you, often doing terrible things to people like us, women and people of colour. I wanted to end with something that has changed. When I was at school, it was a progressive school. It allowed girls to do woodwork, but girls always had to go to the back of the queue. And I was relaying this story to one of my younger colleagues, who was absolutely horrified, and her being horrified has buoyed me up ever since, because what was normal then is not normal now. And let's hope all those small gains that we've made, we can build on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Vivian Thomas.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I've realised in the aftermath of this terrible tragedy that I've actually limited myself in what I can do socially in the evenings, when I've had to walk home on my own in the dark, and more recently when I first became a councillor, I had to attend and needed to attend council meetings, and often walking home on the older streets in Norwich that have lots of alleyways and passages. I did really walk very briskly indeed, and I was very aware of the surroundings all the time. And once I got to the main roads with more lights, I definitely felt less anxious. I think schools have a huge part to play here, and we need to really educate our young people that about relationships, so they can both and all have mutually healthy, respectful relationships with each other. And I just hope with the huge movement that this terrible tragedy's brought about, that things will change for the better, so that younger girls and women than me won't have to live their lives being limited to what they can do socially.
Thank you. Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just wanted to echo some points that were made earlier briefly. Just to say that in response to some things that I've seen on social media this weekend, when men have stepped up but then stepped back again very quickly when they haven't been greeted with as much appreciation as they perhaps expected. I wanted to say that women should be free however they look, if they're not assigned female at birth, if we don't like their politics, if they do jobs that we don't approve of, perhaps like sex workers. I would say a fearful population is a tractable population, and we need to all support one another, no matter what we do, in order to address this.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak? No? Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. It's very moving. So, we'll move on to item 6, questions to Cabinet members and committee chairs. There are 16 questions from members of the Council to Cabinet members, of which notice has been given in accordance with the provisions of Appendix 1 of the Council's Constitution. A copy will be available on the Council's website. Members who have asked questions are permitted to put a supplementary question to the Cabinet member. Question 1. Councillor Bergline, do you have a supplementary question?
I do. Let me just get it up. Thank you. Yes, thank you for the answer. But I have to say I'm a little bit baffled. I mean, we've been really trying to get information on this, and you know, been nothing else but fobbed off about it. I mean, it's coming on to 7 years now that we've been asking the question about Ely Street Play Park. And so you're now telling me that you've been seeking views from the surrounding community. I would like to understand when that happened and how that happened. And I would also like to understand why, as a ward councillor, and especially as a ward councillor who's asked, you know, numerous questions about this, I was neither told about it, I had no information or was involved in it. And I'd also like to point out, having read the constitutions a few times now, that this is against the constitution, because I am an interested party and a ward councillor here.
Thank you. Councillor Packer.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you for your questions, Councillor Bergline. What I would like to do first is to highlight that COVID has obviously slowed down a number of our projects undertaken by our parks team, including the play park at Ely Street. Yet this is to be expected given the world-changing impact the virus has had since early last year. I am a little saddened that you've waited until the final council meeting before elections to raise this matter with me rather than contact me directly about it. I would say to all councillors that if you have concerns about an area of the council service and have already contacted officers, you should approach the relevant cabinet members. Councillor Driver contacted me only yesterday about a matter that I'm looking in for him. So on the play park at Ely Street, just to answer one of the questions, Councillor Bergelein, to be absolutely clear, we are committed to bringing this area back into use by local residents through working with local residents. This will be one of the many projects which is taken forward in the new council year. And I will speak to officers about getting the information that you've requested in the other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 2. Councillor Schmierer, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I do have a supplementary question, and thank you very much to Councillor Walters for his response. So to avoid any doubt regarding Keir Starmer's statement, which I referenced in my original question, would you, Councillor Walters, consider writing a cross-party letter signed by all the group leaders on this council to both the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, saying that we here in Norwich would like to trial those safer consumption rooms in the city to deal with the problem and the associated effects of drug addiction, as we outlined in January last year as part of our motion, please?
Thank you. Councillor Waters.
Well, we can certainly have a discussion about what that letter would look like, though I suspect it either goes to the relevant government minister or it goes to all party leaders in Parliament. That would obviously include the one Green MP who presumably is the leader of her own group. I found it so we can discuss that. I'll be very happy to do that. Though I was kind of intrigued by the extrapolation from 2 words that you quoted to paint a particular picture and a particular narrative, which I hope I've been able to counter with my answer. But do get in touch, and obviously discussions with your own group leader and also with James, the leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you. Question 3. Councillor Osborne, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, please, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Maguire, for your response. As you know, I have been in email contact with you about this previously. Just firstly, I'd like to see the evidence for the claim that community skips generate substantial quantities of waste, because the motion asked Cabinet to investigate this, and I'd like to know what investigation was actually carried out. But my question that I'd like to ask here is, am I right in thinking from this response that, Councillor Maguire, your position is basically that the council's approach to fly tipping is just about good enough? Because that's what it seems to imply. And it seems to imply that just continuing to provide more information to residents will solve the problem. Now, I have countless conversations with residents about fly tipping. It's one of the #1 issues that's raised with me and other ward councillors, as I know it is for other councillors. And it's very clear from those conversations and from research that I've done surveying residents that information on its own is not the solution. That's not the problem. So, Councillor Maguire, are you saying that the council's current approach to fly tipping is good enough?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Maguire.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And thank you for the supplementary question to Councillor Osborne. And again, for thanking him at the time for having the good sense to accept the amendment from the Labour administration, which was accepted at the time, realising it was more akin to the real world. I think there's lots I can say about the landfill of skips and the evidence. And if you really want, I will try to find the records of the time. But if you recall, which you might, it was many years ago that this was tried, and it was got rid of specifically for that reason. You might recall that answer. As to the response with regard to fly tipping, well, you actually might try to speak to to one of your colleagues who I wrote to last year about enforcement strategies, and in particular that going about and just nicking people, which is, I guess, what you'd like to see, as would your colleague in another situation, rather relies on a whole continuum of actions for which the fine and the potential prolonged court action, if there's an appeal on that, is the very last resort. You might also speak to your own leader who has been involved in a study on nudging and can explain why you're wrong to insist on the hard enforcement as an approach to fly tipping. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Question 4. Councillor Carlo, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, thank you, Councillor Stannard, for your reply. As well as agreeing, my supplementary is this, as well as agreeing to invest 15.8 million in 55 Euro 6 diesel buses, First Bus also committed 2.15 million to the refurbishment of its remaining 67 vehicles to bring them up to Euro 6 diesel standard. And so the concern you raise about leaving dirty Euro 3 and 4 diesel buses in service for longer doesn't apply to the first bus fleet. Therefore, do you agree in principle it would be a good idea for First to switch its £15.8 million to get the ball rolling on zero emission buses for Norwich?
Thank you. Councillor Stannard.
Thank you, Councillor Carlo. So the point that I was making was not about First Bus investing in a higher standard Euro 6 diesel buses. It was about the cost of investing in electric buses being so much higher than doing that, that would mean that there wouldn't be enough for the whole fleet, and it would leave some dirty Euro 3 and 4 buses in service. I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding.
You haven't listened, neither have you read the letter, obviously.
Sorry,
I've listened to your answer very carefully. So I think there's a misunderstanding there. But I think more importantly, you'll see from my original answer how much work we have been doing. I mean, we're not just relying passively on bus companies doing the right thing. You'll see that we have been proactive in trying to attract funds for more efficient and indeed all electric bus fleet, in addition to the many other things that we're doing to try and reduce carbon emissions from transportation. And of course, the reason that First Bus made the announcement that it would invest in cleaner diesel buses in the first place was because of the success we've had in attracting Cycle City Ambition money. It's a consequence, I beg your pardon, the Transforming Cities money to invest in more public transport and cycling and walking infrastructure. So it's a direct consequence of our success in bidding for that money and getting that money. And you will know also that there's been an announcement in the last 24 hours or 48 hours about a fund established by the government to greatly reduce carbon emissions from transport. That's something which transport authorities will be able to bid against, and that's something which, of course, that would be the county council in Norfolk, and of course we would encourage them strongly to bid for those funds so that we can see massively improved and cleaner, more ecologically sustainable, more ecologically sound bus transport across the county, but in particular, of course, for us in the city.
Thank you. Question 5. Councillor Price, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do, Lord Mayor. Thank you for the answer. I welcome that the Operations Director of NCSL has agreed to a site visit. However, you have been unclear whether that visit involves ward councillors and local residents, but I assume that is the case, and I look forward to meeting the Director and yourself at Beatrice Road in due course. Your answer has not addressed my question properly. in regard of working with ward councillors and local residents in driving efficiencies in the maintenance programme of NCSL Environmental Services. Will you agree to setting up a series of workshops for each area of the city so ward councillors and residents can be part of improving service delivery, which helps reflect our corporate plan objective to put people and the city first?
Thank you. Councillor Maguire.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. First of all, thank you for your supplementary question, Councillor Price. I must tell you, I had a dear friend who used to say, don't ruin a good story with the facts. That was important for a pub yarn, but sometimes we have to listen to the facts. Yes, we did vote against spending more money, but no, we did not refuse additional road sweeping on the steep roads of Thorpe Hamlet, despite what you tell the residents of your ward. Perhaps you will listen to the facts this time. What I actually said was the savings due to new methods of working with up-to-date planned vehicles, including road sweepers and equipment, along with careful scheduling, many of which have been suggested by the works themselves, will also remove the need to spend an additional 25,000 devoted specifically to the sweeping of leaves. Why spend money twice? And I ended that by saying I would therefore urge colleagues to vote against the final amendment as well. So that's what was actually said. And it's very useful to get facts right. Involving councillors in efficiencies, we listen to ward members. I've already spoken about efficiencies, and by all means, continue to email me and we can arrange another meeting. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Question 6. Councillor Neil, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Waters, for a very detailed response, but alas, it does not give us mere mortals clarity to the question I posed. So for the benefit of my simplistic, lowly councillor understanding, I ask again in hope of a comprehensible layman's answer, will the Cabinet agree to apply similar policies to its own Treasury management strategy and measure the carbon cost of council investments as a first step to fossil fuel divestment and investment in climate solutions? A simple yes or no will suffice.
Thank you. Councillor Waters. Oh, you're still muted, Councillor Waters.
So I'll still say I was delighted to have the opportunity of answering one of the last questions Councillor Neil will be making as a city councillor. And I'm a little surprised by your self-deprecation, given how much your leader has built you up as a man of deep knowledge and interest. So, you know, I wouldn't have wanted to write anything that sort of fell below that high standard that you have, that you clearly have. And so, don't do yourself down, Councillor Neil, because I think you can make the distinction between the Norfolk Pension Fund and how it operates, and I sit on the Norfolk Pension Fund and have been involved in the work that you are praising, along with other members of that committee, and the character of Treasury management investment and the differences. There are similarities, and you know you should draw comfort, I guess, from the fact that there is work being done around ESG and Treasury management funds, but the character of the two things are rather different. So there is not a direct alignment, but the general direction is similar in both within the frameworks within which they have to operate. So I hope that provides you with comfort and clarity, Councillor Neil, and good luck with asking questions up at the County Council if you get elected.
Thank you. Question 7. Councillor Oliver, do you have a supplementary question?
No supplementary, thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Maguire.
Thank you. Question 8. Councillor Stutley, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. No, I don't, but thank you to Councillor Jones for her answer.
Thank you. Question 9. Councillor Mike Sands, do you have a supplementary question?
No supplementary. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to thank the leader for his comprehensive answer.
Thank you. Question 10. Councillor Button, do you have a supplementary question?
No supplementary, Lord Mayor, but thank you for the answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 11. Councillor McGray, do you have a supplementary question?
No supplementary, Lord Mayor, but thank you, Councillor Maguire, for your answer.
Thank you. Question 12. Councillor Erin Fulton McAllister, do you have a supplementary question?
No supplementary, thank you, Lord Mayor, but thank you, Councillor Harris, for your answer.
Thank you. Question 13. Councillor Ackroyd, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor, I do. Thank you, Councillor Stannard, for your answer. My supplementary is this. Would the Cabinet member add his support and that of the Council to efforts to get the county to change what, in my mind, was a mistake to include Christmas Day on the TRO? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stannard.
And clearly, I don't want to get involved in a dispute between you and the county council if I can avoid it. Although I'm happy to raise the matter with them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Question 14. Councillor Wright, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Maguire for your answer. One of the issues that residents had discussed with the council was the wording of this leaflet, which, if you can't see, is the leaflet that has dates and things on for waste collection. And it states on the leaflet, caddies are collected from the edge of the property. Could Councillor Maguire confirm for me that the expectation is that Biffa will collect from both the inside edge as well as the outside edge, as this appears to be where some of the dispute arises? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maguire.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you for the question with the opportunity to clarify. I've not heard that one because I personally always leave my caddy and my bins at the inside edge of my property, and they've always been collected. So I'm not sure what's happened. I think if there is a dispute, please raise it. And if you're not happy with the dispute, then get in touch with me, and I will chase it up. But it's quite clear where we collect from, or Biffa. Biffa have always been, quite responsive. So, to a missed call. In fact, in relation to food, which you understand is more important, particularly in the summer months. The winter months, another 7 days at 0 centigrade isn't going to involve much putrefaction. But in the summer months, clearly the weekly collection is important. And so, yeah, if there is a problem and the people report it, then they will normally be collected. So just get them to report. If there's a problem, then bring it up with me, let me know. But give Biffa a chance to respond first.
Thank you. Question 15. Councillor Lubbock, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Stannard, for your reply and your agreement that a compulsory purchase order would be the best option. And thank you for your offer to ask officers to further explore the issue. Can I ask you to actively encourage a revolving fund to address these single issue sites?
Thank you. Councillor Stannard.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Lubbock. You're absolutely right. one of the constraints, of course, is the availability of funding to support any TRO. Although you will be aware that we have used that power recently, and we're in the process. You may be aware of using it a further time in the city. I mean, what I will do is commit to working with officers to see what would be the most effective way of raising the funds. It might be a revolving fund, or whether there's some other way that we can do it. And I can't make any guarantees, of course, but I can commit to discussing with officers how that might best come about, because I think it's something which does happen from time to time in different parts of the city. This won't be the first or last time, and I understand the effect it has and the blight it causes for local communities and local residents. So I'll do my best on that.
Thank you very much. Question 16, Councillor Osborne, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes,
Your second question.
Give me a second question here. So I'm just really trying to understand, Councillor Kendrick, how the council has ended up in a position where we've got a £21 million backlog in maintenance of assets. And I want to understand what this means for Norwich taxpayers. Now, over the last 10 years, the council's asset management strategy was outsourced, if I could understand that correctly. And I mean, I would expect that any outsourcing activity must be accompanied by appropriate checks to ensure compliance with the contract and with the council's objectives. So can you explain to me what compliance checks were undertaken and how they missed the fact that such an eye-watering backlog was being allowed to build up?
Of course, checks are made up on how our property portfolio is managed. But obviously, Councillor Osborne has rather forgotten the fact that the last 10 years were a decade of austerity, which a central government has totally failed to properly fund local government. And so inevitably, there aren't the resources, sadly, to actually do as much as we as a local authority, or indeed any local authority, would like to do. Many of these properties are historic and quite old properties, and they do take a great deal of money to actually maintain and repair. And as I say, there simply isn't the money in local government. I don't think there ever was, but there certainly isn't the money now after 10 years of Tory rule to do absolutely everything we'd like to do to make sure every single building was in tip-top condition. It's as simple as that.
Thank you. Right, we'll move to item 7, Pay Policy Statement 2021 to 2022. I call upon Councillor Waters to move item 6.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. This report, as colleagues will know, has gone to Cabinet. It now comes for approval at full council. So this is the annual pay policy statement, which is one of the provisions of the Localism Act. You're asked to recommend approve the council's pay policy statement. What I want to do is highlight some aspects of that policy which we operate at the City Council to hopefully win your support for what we've been doing as a council over the past year. So I would commend this report to you on the following salient facts: that all employees are paid no less than the real living wage, that the pay multiples between the highest paid median earners and the highest paid member of staff is a ratio of 1.474, ratio of just under 1 to 5, and the ratio between the highest and lowest pay point full-time equivalent is a ratio of just under 1 to 8. There are no bonus or performance payments made. There is provision for subscriptions and support for people developing their professional qualifications and careers. There is enhanced redundancy payments based not on a small minimum statutory sum, but based on the actual week's pay and multiplied by a factor of 1.5. There is salary sacrifice for childcare vouchers and a cycle to work initiative. And the gender pay gap at the City Council is 0. Now, there's a lot of other information in that report that gives you a profile of the different tiers of pay, the different key appointments and jobs and their descriptions. But I think what this highlights is that we seek always to be a good employer and to enhance employment opportunities and terms and conditions of service in what remains a really very difficult environment for local government, given the last 10 or 12 years of austerity and squeezing of the funding of councils and the services that we're able to provide. I move the report and the recommendation, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I call upon Councillor Mike Sands to second the item.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I formally second the item, and may I speak briefly now?
Thank you.
I'm pleased to both second and recommend the pay policy statement. This detailed policy represents a whole raft and range of positives. I'll be brief, but Councillor Waters, as we mentioned, that the council does not operate either a bonus scheme or a pay performance related scheme, which I think are two very, very positive elements of this pay policy. On page 6, point 6.3, which is a statement on pay progression. This represents an opportunity for officers from those on the lowest of the pay scale to those on the highest to develop a career path and a progression, which again, I think is an extremely positive aspect of this pay policy. It's a way of retaining people within the organisation as they develop and enhance their knowledge, experience and skills. It's an excellent pay policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to invite group spokespersons. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just to echo, first of all, what Councillor Waters and Councillor Sands have said about the benefits of this pay policy, and particularly to emphasise, as I'm sure we all support the commitment to a real living wage in this pay policy, and for contractors as well. And clearly the council has an important role to play, not only in treating its staff well, but also in setting standards and advocating more broadly for a adoption of a real living wage by other employers. And I and other Green councillors fully support the council's excellent work on that. Likewise, to echo the fact that there's no gender pay gap at this council, which I'm very supportive of. There's a couple of issues that I do think need to be looked at more closely in this pay policy. One is the way that the redundancy payment enhancement factor of 1.5 actually ends up benefiting those on higher salaries disproportionately more than those on lower salaries. And of course, we don't want to be making redundancies at all. And I'm pleased that so far this council has largely avoided making redundancies, especially for frontline staff at a difficult time. However, if and when redundancies do have to be made as a result of the changing nature of local government, then I think it's right that the council recognises the valuable contribution that staff have made. And I don't think that anyone in this council would suggest that lower paid staff contribute less than more senior staff proportionally. So I think that needs to be looked at again. The other issue that I would like to raise, which I have raised before, is about the provision of free parking to council staff in some circumstances, and whether that's really appropriate at this time. I'd point out that the City Council recently called on the County Council to introduce a workplace parking levy to discourage the use of private cars when driving to work, and all the problems of congestion, air pollution, carbon emissions, and poor health that brings. Not to mention, of course, that the City Council is also introducing charging for parking at parks. So why are we not applying the same principles to areas that are under our own direct control in parking for staff? And to be very clear, this is not about penalising staff who drive to work. It's about looking at what the council incentivises and making sure that there's consistency between what the council says and what it does. But nevertheless, overall, I think that this is a very positive pay policy that I'm happy to support. And I hope to have a constructive discussion with councillors about those issues that I raised.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to associate myself with all the comments from the other speakers so far, and don't intend to duplicate those given the hour. But the one point I wanted to pick up, having looked through this paper, was that of cycling. The Cycle to Work initiative is a really good thing, and it's great that the council participates in that. But what I'm interested in, and perhaps this could make it in when the policy comes back to us next year, is what we do about what cycling and our staff cycling whilst they're at work, cycling for work. 6.5 of the report talks about the mileage rate when using your personal car, your private car, for carrying out council business. But HMRC have an approved mileage rate of 20 pence per mile when using your bike for carrying out the business of your employer. So should we be reflecting that? I know that the County Council has a cycle mileage rate included in its policy for its staff. Should we have one if we don't already? But I don't see it reflected in this policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors indicate they wish to speak on this? No? Okay. Councillor Waters, would you like to respond?
Yes, just briefly, and thank colleagues for their positive and supportive comments about the pay policy. I mean, I think the point about different rates of redundancy pay, which Councillor Osborne raised, I think I would link that back to the if we had a ratio of difference which was 1 to 50, or 1 to 25, or well, it would never be this 1 to 364, which is sometimes the ratio between directors of companies, FTSE companies, and their workforce. There would be the question would have more salience, I guess. But given that we have extremely tight ratios between the highest and lowest paid, I think in that case the redundancy pay framework is not unreasonable, and there is a recognition, of course, of people who are in more responsible positions, earning more money. We provide as many opportunities as we can for people, obviously, to make progression. And I've known many people over the years who have been able to do that. But I think that would be a more pertinent question if we were looking at a widening pay ratio. And this has been very stable. In fact, it's dropped incrementally over the years to be a much narrower margin. Some interesting and important points about parking. Of course, staff are enjoying at the moment, as part of provision through the COVID difficulties and people coming into work and so on, some parking space at St Giles. We obviously have electric cars. We try and encourage for our staff, as well as for ourselves, as well as for residents, modal shift in how they can move around the city and get into the city. I would certainly like to see, out of some of this money which the government have given, some better bus routes from the edge of the city, or the inner perimeter, as you were, when you're outside of Norwich. I mean, you can be 2 or 3 miles from Norwich, and yet there's very poor bus services. So some comprehensive provisioning in those respects, in very energy efficient buses, would be, I think, a very good contribution and a very significant alternative to some of the other modes of transport which we're trying to ensure people are not unnecessarily using. So always happy to pick up other points or observations or suggestions, of course, to see if we can improve that element of the package we provide for our hard-working and committed staff.
Thank you. We'll now move to the vote. All those against? Yep. Abstentions? Yep. In favour? Okay, it's carried. Right. Item 8, Constitution Review. I call upon Councillor Kendrick to move item 7.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank very much Jeff Wild, our monitoring officer, for all the extra work he's done on this particular paper. And I think that this council will be grateful to him for the years to come. For I think he will have improved our experience as councillors and improved the level of democracy we have in this council. So I first of all wish to make that quite clear. I'd also like to make my thanks to the members of the Constitution Working Party, who, of all parties, by the way, who were involved in this particular committee, of which I was fortunate enough to attend the second meeting. Again, a lot of work was put into it. It was an opportunity for members to make amendments, and some were done. I think perhaps, Lord Mayor, I should try and be brief, because looking at how far we're progressing in this agenda, it's probably not likely we'll finish this council meeting at 9:30 this evening, rather 9:30 tomorrow morning. But all the same, I think this is an excellent document, and the ones that I would very much ask this council to endorse.
Thank you. I call upon Councillor Waters to second the item.
Yes, happy to second, Lord Mayor. I'll reserve the right to speak. I will speak a little later, but I'll reserve my comments at this point.
Thank you. I'd like to invite group spokespersons now. Councillor Carlow.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to add my warm thanks to Jeff Wild, the monitoring officer, for taking the initiative to review and revamp the council's constitution. This was last undertaken about 20 years ago, and updates since then have been ad hoc and piecemeal. And so members can imagine what a huge task it's been to knock the changes and numerous sections and appendices into a streamlined document. As Councillor Kendrick has said, Jeff has performed an excellent job of revising and improving the readability of the Constitution and on advising members. I'd also like to thank Working Party members for the valuable discussions and the give and take on some procedural matters. I didn't think it would be possible to plough through the 200 pages at just 2 meetings, but Alan Waters, very able chairing, enabled us to go through page by page. And a final thank you should go to Jackie Roger, the committee secretary, for recording lengthy and very involved exchanges. The Green Group is pleased that several of our small changes were accepted. We are disappointed that our suggested changes to several matters of a more political nature were not accepted, notably no changes to suspension of standing orders, and no change to voting along party political lines at scrutiny. And we hope that the scrutiny committee will maybe address our particular concerns. A change that's been made to the Constitution subsequent to the Working Party meetings is the restriction on word numbers of questions submitted by members of the public. Now, Democratic Services may reject a question if it exceeds 150 words. Previously, there was no word limit. The explanatory note says that the word count allows more public questions to be considered. However, there's been no corresponding change to the maximum number of 5 public questions allowed at council meetings. Correspondingly, the councillor response to public questions is also capped at 150 words. I'm not sure about this being a good idea either. Certainly, it'll put a cap on the lengthy political speeches delivered in reply. But on the other hand, a councillor having to explain in detail the council's position on matters of public concern is important. This change is something which the meeting tonight may have a view on. Previously, I had only dipped into bits of the Constitution, but as a member of the Working Party, I was required to read through all 200 pages, and it proved a valuable read in improving my understanding of the council's processes and what I can expect from the council as a councillor. For example, the importance of officers consulting councillors in a timely way and keeping us informed about matters in our wards. I shall certainly keep the revised Constitution on my desk for regular reference and encourage all members and everyone in the council's employ to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ackroyd.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Many thanks to Jeff Wiles in particular and all other officers involved for many hours of work that have gone into producing this massive update of the Constitution. As you've heard already, this is the first major overhaul undertaken in 20 years. I think thanks too to Alan for his very calm chairing of the meeting and for making us all feel involved, and to Jackie for her usual efficiency in note-taking. A huge amount has been achieved, and before us we now have a document that is much easier to navigate and understand. This has been a far-reaching review, but will be a continually evolving document with opportunities to make sure that it remains fit for purpose in the months and years to come. Looking at this evening with 5 motions before us, maybe in future it could be time to consider a change of approach in relation to motions, perhaps to the council equivalent of a parliamentary early day motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to indicate they'd like to contribute? Councillor Waters.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I would add all my thanks to Jeff and to Jackie, but actually to the committee as well. I think this the members of the Constitution Working Party can be rightly proud of what they were able to do in a very tight time frame. There was some give and take, but I think the important thing is that we probably reflected a little bit more on how we might remove some of the more partisan behaviours. I think that's we will all have a view about who's partisan and who isn't, but you know, let's just for the sake of consensus spread it around a bit. So I think particularly with scrutiny, I remember we looked at a clause which was whether we should have some sort of ring-fenced work programme proposals from political groups. And yet the previous clause, we'd all come to the view that actually a non-partisan approach was the most effective way and the most effective culture in which we could, you know, deliver good scrutiny interactions, but also good outcomes and good strong recommendations. The point has been made, I think, both by Denise and also by Caroline, that, you know, we've revised the Constitution. It's a living document, and we can go back and we can look at things again. We can look at some of the things that have been agreed. And, you know, the last time we'd had the Constitution Working Party before the two we had recently was well over a year. And so the view that we really need to have, you know, fixed Constitution Working Parties that come together to look at if there is nothing necessarily to fundamentally change or a section that needs changing in our ratification, you know, at the very least we can just have a reflection about how well the Constitution is working. So, you know, the 150 words will be worth testing out. It's kind of more Chekhov than Tolstoy, but let's see if Chekhov can, you know, improve the quality of questions and answers in a concise way and save a bit of time. But once again, my thanks to officers, but very much to colleagues who helped to make this a successful exercise.
Okay, thank you. Any other councillors wish to contribute? No. Okay. Councillor Kendrick, would you like to respond?
Nothing to add.
Thank you. We'll move to the vote. All those against? Okay. Abstentions? Okay. And all those in favour? Okay. That's carried. Thank you very much. Item 9, appointment of Section 151 officer. Officers will just take a moment to remove Annabelle Scholes from the meeting for the duration of this item. I call upon Councillor Kendrick to move item 8.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I think Annabel Scholes shouldn't have too much to worry about, because I think we're all going to say some very nice things about her. I certainly am anyway. Again, I'll obviously try and be brief, because I do realise the time constraints that are upon us. But all the same, this is a very happy occasion for me. I've worked very closely with Annabel over the last few months, and I very much enjoyed the process and the very, very good, strong working relationship that we have built up. And of course, it's not just herself, but she has a good team there with Hannah Simpson and many others. It's the next financial team that we all have here on this council. And I'm so happy that Annabel has decided to join us as a permanent member of staff. She has so many positive attributes to go on to this. I indeed would probably go on till 9:30 in the morning, just saying how good she is. But I was very, very pleased that the council was able to appoint her. As I say, I've worked with her for many months and been very impressed with her. And I'm very much looking forward to the years ahead. Again, we're working with Annabel, who I think is going to be a very trusted and true colleague of ours in obviously these very difficult financial times that we live in, and I'm sure Annabel will be the first to accept that. Probably no senior finance officer of this council probably is probably like to face the kind of tough decisions that we're going to have all of us have to face in the years to come because of this present Conservative government, which I fear is likely to continue with yet another decade of austerity. But finally, can I just again say how pleased I am to say that Annabel Scholes will continue to be our Chief Finance Officer, and obviously I would urge members to endorse this recommendation. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Stuart, could I ask you to second the item?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I'd like to associate myself with comments made by Councillor Kendrick. With the notable exception of Chair of Licensing, this Section 151 officer and this newly created role is arguably one of the most important on the council, especially as we face challenging post-pandemic recovery period. Even in normal Tory austerity times, this role carries great responsibility. However, I welcome Annabel with complete confidence that we're in very good hands. So formally seconded. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd now like to invite group spokespersons. Councillor Bergelein.
I'd like to echo the comments that have already been made by Councillor Kendrick and Councillor Stuart. We're very happy with that appointment and extremely glad that Annabel has decided to join us in the long term. And she has clearly shown her competence by delivering a budget in the most testing of times, fast moving of times. And so I have no doubt at all that we've got an excellent new Section 151 officer.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We're very happy to endorse the permanent appointment of Annabel Scholes as our Section 151 officer. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to indicate that contribute? No? Okay. Sorry. Oh, Councillor Peake. Sorry, Councillor Peake. I missed that. Councillor Peake.
Yeah, thanks, Lord Mayor. I meet Annabel Scholes every other Monday for the portfolio briefing with Paul Kendrick, and what she does is very amazing. She's very clever, and I think she's up for this totally, and she gets my endorsement as well.
Thank you very much. Any other councillors? Nope. Okay. Councillor Kendrick, would you like to respond?
All I wish to say is I hope, and I'm sure this will be the case, that the other officers will tell Annabel how positive the response of this council was to her appointment as our permanent senior finance officer. So once again, I would urge members to endorse this.
Thank you. We'll now move to the vote. All those against? No. Abstentions? No. In favour? Okay, that's carried. Right, please can I ask officers to bring Annabel Scholes back into the meeting? Yeah. Thank you. As we reach the 2-hour point of the meeting, I will ask if any of the remaining business can be taken as unopposed before we take a 10-minute break. We will then resume with any business that is not agreed as unopposed until a convenient point before the 3-hour mark of the meeting. Okay. Approval of redundancy costs. Can we take this as unopposed business? I need to ask the proposer of each of the motions to confirm whether they are happy to take their motion as unopposed business, and other councillors will be given an opportunity to indicate if they do wish to oppose an item. Does anyone wish to oppose the approval of redundancy costs? No. Okay. Promoting pollinators in the city. Councillor Packer, are you happy for your motion to be taken as unopposed?
No, I'd like us to speak about it, please, Lord Mayor.
Okay. Advertising. Councillor Schmierer, are you happy for your motion to be taken unopposed?
Yes, I would be happy to take it unopposed.
Does any other councillor wish to oppose this motion?
Lord Mayor, yes, we wish to oppose this motion.
Okay, thank you. The right to food. Councillor Huntley, are you happy for this motion to be taken unopposed?
No, Lord Mayor, I'd like to speak to this, please.
Okay. Retrofitting. Councillor Osborne, are you happy for this, for your motion to be taken as unopposed business?
Yes, I am. Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to oppose this motion, including the amendments which the proposer has agreed? Okay, thank you. And stand up for carers motion. Councillor Wright, are you happy for your motion to be taken as unopposed business?
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. I am happy for it to be taken as unopposed.
Okay, thank you. We'll take a 10-minute break now and resume with business which has not been agreed, can be taken as unopposed. Thank you. Okay. Are we all back? Yep. No. Okay. 10A, motion promoting pollinators in the city. I've been informed that there is a change of seconder for this motion. Councillor Huntley will now be seconding the motion. I call upon Councillor Packer to move motion 10A.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The decline of bee species and other pollinators in recent years is an environmental and economic catastrophe. In the UK, 13 bee species are extinct, and now 1 in 10 of Europe's wild bee species are under threat. The health of our bees and pollinators is too precious to be bargained with. Bees are responsible for pollinating 70% of the fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds we eat. If we start losing these key foods, it will have a catastrophic impact on our future food security. We must ensure that every step we take towards recovery from the coronavirus to secure our economy and rebuild our country is a step towards protecting our environment. Our actions must represent a renewed drive to tread lighter on our planet, protect vulnerable habitats and species, and recognise that what follows from the virus must be better than what came before. Labour backs our farmers, but the recent lifting of a ban on bee-killing pesticides is not the answer. Better support for the sector and accelerated introduction of blight-resistant crops are required. The Council's biodiversity plan is due to come to Cabinet shortly, but for the onset and the impact of COVID, it would already have been completed. However, our concentration since early 2020 has been to ensure that we have done all we can to support, feed and protect our residents. Without a commitment to do this across departments and teams, the impact of COVID would have been even greater. So turning to this motion, the Council already undertakes important actions to help pollinators. However, we should always aspire to do more. That is why I've moved this motion this evening. The actions within this motion will fit neatly within the high-level document that will be the biodiversity strategy. Norwich City Council is committed to helping to conserve the UK's pollinators by ensuring the Council will consider the needs of pollinators, the delivery of its duties and work. We have a track record over a number of years of supporting and promoting pollinators in the city, amongst other things through managing the city's green space to provide greater benefits for pollinators, promoting the need to increase planting of pollinator-friendly plants to our residents, working with friends of and community groups to increase the number of variety of wildflowers and plants planted to attract pollinators, by not using neonics, and trialling locally grown meadow roll matting within our cemeteries on scrubland. The Council will seek to protect and increase the amount and quality of pollinator habitats and manage its green spaces to provide greater benefits for pollinators. We are committed to doing this through the work we undertake, as well as by seeking to influence our partners and central government. This Labour-led administration will ensure local people are provided with opportunities to make Norwich more pollinator friendly. The Council already undertakes important actions to help pollinators. However, we should always aspire to do more. The motion this evening commits us to doing just that. I hope you will support this motion, which will develop and promote all of the good things that we are doing and far more. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Huntley, to second the item.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. In the Renaissance period, a popular emblem used by Sir Philip Sidney, among others, was the image of a swarm of bees, together with the motto non nobis, not for ourselves. The beehive offered a powerful symbol for industrious, cooperative working, good government, and the benefits of acting together. It's for these reasons that the cooperative movement in the 19th century adorned buildings with an image of the beehive. In looking to ensure the well-being of all pollinators, promote biodiversity, and protect pollinator habitats where possible. This motion follows in the spirit of cooperative practice and seeks support from a variety of stakeholders. In Waterloo Park, for instance, the Friends Group is working with Norwich City Council to establish a wildflower meadow and allowing ivy to grow as an abundant late source for pollinator insects. Such good practice should be promoted across the city, and this motion seeks to involve local communities in raising awareness. It also addresses the environmental harm resulting from losing pollinators. Perhaps because of their image of order and altruism, the writer John Gay chose bees for his satirical fable called The Degenerate Bees, where selfish, greedy ambition is what leads to the public ruin of the hive. Today, we could signify that selfish, greedy ambition, not through bees themselves, but the neonicotinoids that devastate them. Is there a better illustration of the rapacity, myopia, and idiocy of late capitalism than the use of poisons to protect crops from insects for short-term gain, when these pesticides will, in the long term, eradicate the very pollinators on which future growth and plentiful harvests must depend? Lord Mayor, I endorse this motion.
Thank you. I'd like to invite group spokespersons. Councillor Bergline.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Do I agree with the sentiment of the motion and the actions included in general? 100%. We all understand the importance of pollinators for crops and ecosystem, and we also know the severe threat they are under. For me, the government's decision to give an emergency license to a pesticide which is known to be seriously harmful to pollinator populations in order to save crop is the definition of the kind of toxic short-term thinking that created the biodiversity emergency. So yes, I do think the council can and should do more to protect pollinator populations, and I'm glad to see that this is an acknowledgement across the council chamber. However, and this is a big however, this is exactly why we have brought a motion to address the biodiversity emergency almost 2 years ago, and that was not our first attempt at getting the Labour Council to take decisive action to protect biodiversity. Now, I much rather you would have spent the time to actually produce the Biodiversity Action Plan than debating this motion. I would have assumed that the Biodiversity Action Plan, which is still nowhere to be seen, would contain a section on pollinators, because by your logic, I will need to bring a soil-based biodiversity motion next month and so on. So forgive me, but I feel that this is just warm words, and what we really have yet to see is action. In addition, I really struggle with the following. The emergency can't be that much of an emergency if it was okay to wait 12 months since we have seen the first draft of this motion in March 2020, when you thought there would be soon a local election. We had a number of full councils where you could have brought this pollinator emergency motion, but you haven't, which makes me think, and I'm normally not a very cynical person, that this is an election move. But it is not a very smart one, because what you can expect is that we will point out all the occasions where you haven't acted to protect pollinators or other forms of biodiversity. So I will start and highlight some of the responses the council has given to my original biodiversity motion, which may also enlighten Labour members where they need to change the approach rather than simply talk about it. One of my requests in the biodiversity motion was to update the council's biodiversity action plan, which shockingly was last updated in 2002. The response, which everyone can read on the motion tracker, was that this work would start in 2020 and would be brought to SEEP for discussion in 2020. You might be privy to more information, but I haven't seen any work done on updating the Biodiversity Action Plan, and that is despite members of the SEEP panel repeatedly asking for an update. The motion tracker states that the revised Biodiversity Action Plan will detail how the Council will support and enhance the biodiversity of priority species, which I assume would include pollinators. So again, all the actions you're asking for in this motion should have been completed within the last year and earlier, according to your own commitment. This motion states again that the Council will continue to work with Pesticide Action Network to lead to an end in use of pesticides. While this sounds great, according to the Council's own original plan for a phase-out of pesticides within 3 years, you should by now be coming to the end of this work. By the time services transition to our own wholly owned company, the use of pesticides by the Council should be stopped. Maybe the Cabinet member can assure me that Norwich City Services will indeed, as would be expected as part of the original 3-year phase-out, not use any pesticides in their work. Your pollinator motion seeks to ensure the well-being of pollinators, for example, through grass cutting and pollinator-friendly planting regimes. This is exactly the same action I asked for in the biodiversity motion. You will be equally disappointed that the Council's response to this was that this would divert resources from the existing management of communal areas and increase cost, and therefore the housing team was asked to look at this. No response to this as of yet. Maybe your motion has more success at getting a response from yourselves. If you would like to find out more about what the Council has not yet done to improve biodiversity and therefore protect pollinators, please have a look at the initial responses to the biodiversity motion on the motion tracker. Responses that have not been worked on any further since. But I'm of course happy to support your motion, and ever the optimist, I hope that this doubling up will mean that we will soon see an ambitious updated biodiversity action plan with a subsection of a pollinator action plan. Especially as ground maintenance is transferred back in-house, this is a really exciting opportunity to be true to our commitment of enhancing biodiversity and protecting pollinators. I would also be delighted to sign a cross-party letter to the government to express our frustration with the completely illogical decision to give emergency approval and support for damaging pesticides. Only pure luck based on weather patterns means that this year sugar beet farmers will not be treating their crops with pesticides that have rightfully been banned in other countries, as they are known to harm pollinators. So I'm obviously happy to support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Ackroyd.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. 11 of the UK's 27 species of bumblebee are already extinct or highly endangered. Add to this 76% of butterflies in long-term decline and 97% of natural flower-rich habitats such as meadows lost in a single generation. Depressing statistics and facts. And clearly this council must step up, continue what it's already begun, and look for ways of increasing its influence on individuals, the community, and not least, trying to put pressure on the government. The widespread decline of bees has caused great concern in recent years, but towns and cities have been suggested as potential sanctuaries. Research carried out in 4 UK cities concluded that public spaces, allotments, and private gardens can play a big part as a haven for bees and other pollinators, helping to arrest their alarming decline. We can all give examples in our own wards of collaboration between the council and residents to improve the well-being of pollinators by, for example, taking a relatively small part of an area that's usually cut regularly and replanting with wild flowers. On cost grounds, the local church has changed its management of the burial ground and is working towards a wildflower meadow rather than neatly manicured grass between the graves. But there is so much more to be done. The motion before us identifies various strategies, including producing a pollinator action plan, with presumably the aim of rolling into a strategy, ongoing work and future plans, looking to produce a local environment rich in pollinator-friendly habitats, helping support sustainable pollinator populations, ensuring that individual residents, community groups, businesses, and landowners are provided with information to help protect and increase pollinators. We've been programmed to believe that manicured, regularly cut grass verges indicate a council doing its job. The time has come for us all to realise that long grass and flowers are a sign that the council has the message. In discharging its functions as a planning authority and in giving planning advice, this council can seek to ensure that pollinator habitats are protected and enhanced, and will require where possible that new developments result in a net gain for pollinators. The planning committee has a crucial role to play here in making it clear to applicants and residents that yes, we urgently need homes, but we also urgently need green spaces, including gardens and wildlife corridors. Crucially, the motion ends with pressure to act on the government, much harder to achieve. Last year, a report highlighted the fact that the UK was on course to miss its own targets for protecting its natural spaces. Not content with that, in January, the government overturned the promise they made not to allow farmers to use bee-harming pesticides on their fields by giving emergency authorization for one such product to use on sugar beet seeds. In the event, the pest threshold was not passed, so this seed treatment was not used. But the ban remains for 2021, but a derogation in 2022 is possible, particularly if there's no frost over next winter to keep the overwintering population of aphids low. Conservationists are clear that the use of this pesticide threatens not only bees, but also wildflowers and the human population itself, as watercourses could be contaminated. It is alarming and maybe not surprising that the ban, which applies across Europe, has been lifted here in Britain as one of the very first acts of the Conservative government upon leaving the European Union. Taking back control clearly means, in this case, contaminating your own country, destroying the ecosystem, and further damaging the already fragile bee population of Britain. Clearly, the focus must be on banning harmful pesticides and working with farmers to adopt workable, non-chemical alternatives. The Soil Association and Pan-UK have exposed how mixtures of pesticides commonly found in UK food, water and soil and not yet banned may be harming the health of both humans and wildlife. Their report shows around a quarter of all food and over a third of fruit and vegetables consumed in the UK contain pesticide cocktails, with some items containing traces of up to 14 different pesticides. There is a growing body of evidence showing pesticides can become more harmful when combined, even when each individual chemical appears at levels at or below its no observed effect concentration. We are very happy to support all aspects of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other councillors who wish to indicate to speak? Councillor Maguire, I understand.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to start by saying it's a privilege to be able to speak on this important motion before the council this evening. I recall my first coming to Norwich in October 71 to attend UEA. It's a long time ago now. I walked around the campus still in its infancy, and I walked around the university village with its barn and the sweep of that meadow down to the river. I walked around Earlham House and Earlham Park with the open fields, the huge nursery and the exotic aviary. Towards the end of the day, I walked around West Earland and marvelled at the wide roads with their many grass verges and the houses with their generous gardens, also very well tended by the residents. I began to have a sense that Norwich took nature seriously. And having become interested in the organic movement and the increased concern of pollution at a global level, in my second year, I happened to be chatting with one of the guards in Earlham Park at the time. And he told me the little tricks they used to keep down some of the more voracious plant predators and things they did to reduce various plant diseases. He didn't use the word organic. For him, it was just natural. As a wannabe ecologist, I knew I'd chosen the right university and the right city. The gardener also spoke enthusiastically about how insects helped to make the parks and the gardens work. He and his colleagues knew then what many are having to relearn now. Of course, we then had many great economic changes. The attack on the local government spending began in the 80s when we saw the emergence of what Ulrich Beck called technoscience. Technoscience, for this environmental sociologist, was sold as a liberator of the individual, but having started to destroy social solidarity, it then made people more dependent on those technologies. Pesticides were cheaper than humans. And as people lost their jobs during those merciless days of a hard right government, pesticides were seen as the quick fix. Thankfully, while the city had to roam with the rest of the city and use pesticides to some extent, they were far from happy and tried where they could not to use it. And that conversation with the gardener must have stuck in my mind. because about 16 years later, I found myself working for the city and being tasked with organising a conference on reducing pesticide use. That pesticide that I referred to in that growth in the 80s. There was a much greater variety of pesticides available in those days. Many were persistent. Many were directly toxic to humans as well as other life forms. Great reductions followed, not only by the City Council, but by so many of the local authorities who attended that conference. Lord Mayor, Norwich has a long history of reducing the use of pesticides and a long understanding of the importance of pollinators. This motion, along with the forthcoming biodiversity strategy, crystallises that long-term commitment to the environment, our ecosystem and pollinators. Finally, Lord Mayor, as someone who worked with the animal behaviourist James Cllr at NTU, I must really emphasise that while the honey bee is iconic, it is far from the only or the most important pollinator. In view of Dr. Stiller's work, I must give a shout out to the bumblebees and of course the solitary bee, along with those other pollinators. I hope everyone in this virtual chamber supports this motion. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Peake.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just a little bit of clarification. Councillor Packer has had this motion on the table for months. It's not just come up because it's coming up to elections, and is so dedicated towards it, and what he's put in this motion is brilliant. But just let Councillor Bogline know it's not a budget council that stopped it, it's other ones before because the motion's run out of time. So it's been on the table for months. It's not just been put on just now. And with the bee pollinators, they are amazing. They're clever animals and they need looking after. Without them, we are in terrible trouble. So this motion is brilliant.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Carlow.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I support this motion, but my question is, where has Labour been on this subject all these years? In 2011, I proposed a new development management plan policy for ensuring small biodiversity features in new developments. A policy reference was added to the adopted plan, but watered down by the council for fear of increasing developer costs. I sat on the planning committee for 3 years and very few applications included small biodiversity features. In 2016, I brought a motion on increasing biodiversity in Norwich, and although passed, little has changed. In 2017, I tried encouraging the council to invest alternatives to herbicides and arranged for weeding tech to visit Norwich and trial foam stream used by several authorities. The council said that glyphosate was more cost effective. In fact, I'm amazed to hear Councillor Maguire's comment tonight, because he defended the use of glyphosate in the council chamber when I raised the question with him. One place in Norwich where pollinators have been studied in detail is in Earlham Cemetery, a county wildlife site. Pollinators include hoverflies, beetles, butterflies, moths, and other insects, as well as the many different types of bees. And there are 60 bees which have been identified in different types of bees in Earlham Cemetery. And they need nectar and pollen from flowers as a source of food. The Friends of Earlham Cemetery drew up a habitat management plan in 2015 in conjunction with the Norfolk Wildlife Trust. The council adopted the plan, but they don't always follow it. The cemetery grass is cut too frequently, removing the flowers which are vital for pollinators. In 2020, the cemetery's grass was mown so frequently and extensively that by late June, the only place with flowers for insects was the Commonwealth War Graves area, and those are not managed by North or the City Council. Frequent grass cutting around Norwich continues as required by contract. A few years ago, I tabled for scrutiny the council's grounds maintenance work programme and budget, which included an annual grass cutting budget of £900,000, but ranks closed on the committee and all suggested changes were rejected. Hopefully, the biodiversity emergency is now changing minds. Bringing environmental services back in-house will be a chance to improve biodiversity by re-evaluating the grounds maintenance work programme and upskilling the workforce. Incidentally, this morning a resident emailed me about the frequent grass cutting around the city, saying, "Less frequent mowing reduces cost, benefits pollinators, and is so uplifting to our well-being." And we can all say hear, hear to that. By looking after what we already have and managing Norwich's green spaces, trees and shrubs with greater understanding and care, we can help pollinators without having to spend extra money. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to contribute? Councillor Price.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll be brief. Of course, this motion will be supported by Green councillors because it builds on the work that we've been trying to introduce at this council for many, many years. I think as someone who kind of works with plants and pollinators on a daily basis, you know, we can all see that they are in sharp decline, and that not having this situation managed well in the past, not having the holistic approach to managing these green spaces to link the wildlife corridors together has only exacerbated that situation. And this could be too little too late. And so I do welcome it coming forward. I do think that there should be a commitment to completely removing pesticides with the new environmental company, as based upon the work that Councillor Bogerling had already undertaken. So it's disappointing to see that. Again, with grass cutting and things of this nature, I've offered my hand to Councillor Maguire earlier today to sit down with residents and ward councillors to try to help identify areas where these biodiversity sites could be managed better. And I hope he does actually look to take that engagement up. And I think finally, I think the point is that this motion was scheduled to come right before the last election in March of last year, which was then cancelled. Labour have had the whole year to bring this motion to council. Why delay? It's not changed. Isn't it interesting that it's right before an election that it's finally brought back to us? So we're happy to endorse this small aspect, and we are hopefully going to see the actual action on the previous biodiversity motion happen now. So thank you for your support, Labour, in our continuing work to protect this planet.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to contribute? Councillor Osborne.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. Again, I'll be brief. Just picking up on something that Councillor Packer said about the fact that, you know, COVID intervened in the development of the biodiversity emergency strategy. Obviously, there was a number of months between that motion passing and it the pandemic beginning. So I'm just going to have to let that in. You know, and it's not been a new topic. And, you know, I know that Councillor Bogerline, in proposing that motion, actually worked closely with officers to, you know, work out what was feasible for the council to achieve. And, you know, we would have hoped that, given that it's an emergency, that work would start more or less immediately after passing that motion. The other point I'd like to make is that, you know, there's been quite a lot of talk this evening about how important pollinators are to humans and to the economy, to food supply. Councillor Maguire made a point about the impact of introducing pesticides on jobs. And, you know, that's a very well made point. And, you know, as we look to recover from COVID and build back the economy, you know, I'd hope that biodiversity and the biodiversity strategy that we've been asking for a long time would be an integral part of that, and, you know, a forefront of the council's response to recovering from COVID, especially as we've seen how important green space is as well during the pandemic. And, you know, at the when this council debated the blueprint for the COVID recovery back in June last year. I think Green councillors, I'm trying to remember exactly what happened, but I certainly pointed out that biodiversity was only mentioned once, I think, in that report. And I would hope that it would be much more of a focus and a sort of cornerstone of the work that we're doing.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to contribute? Councillor McCartney-Gray.
Excuse me. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I feel I would like to raise the fact that we take a holistic approach to all that we do. We may not appear to meet the green desires, but we achieve all that we do by looking at the social and the economic as well as the environmental issues. To do otherwise would fail in all that we achieve. If you want to have a pop, you could add that our environmental targets are met not just as the Greens would like via an advent calendar, where they can take a chocolate unicorn out of each day. Rather, in the real world, targets are achieved in varying timescales. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Oh, dear me. Councillor Maguire.
Councillor Driver.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm definitely welcome this motion tonight, and it's a great shame that took a long while to get here, but it's good it's here now. Can I just say, as chair of Norwich in Bloom, can I just congratulate the city on the work they have done over the years and the awards that this city has won for biodiversity and for flowers in East Anglia. We often win the gold award for the whole eastern region. We beat out the other cities who come up against us. Can I also say that the communities in the city, I mean, the Danby Woods we got ones at Tutswood, the Wensum mole pit area where they got hives there and bees. They look after bees, and the community gardens there, the wildflowers right there in the meadows, and there's a loads and loads of communities out there putting bits in. Friends of Eaton Park. Eaton Park have won a green flag in the last 3 or 4 years, which we're proud to show off in Eaton Park. And can I just say this? They have to be assessed every year, and they have to improve every year. If not, they lose the green flag. Can I just say they've still got it? Mousehold Heath has now got a green flag. Can I congratulate that? The pineapple garden in the cathedral, the herb garden in the cathedral, have got a green flag. Can I just say that we're one of the places in the eastern region who are pioneering things like this for the biodiversity in the city. And so we should be proud what we're doing here. The work what the City College do with disabled kids who produce all our flowers and stuff for all our roundabouts and stuff like that. It's just a shame now we're lost to that. And I just hope that County Council will keep our roundabouts up to a decent standing, because those people who were born in Norwich can remember all the roundabouts. Everyone used to mention them when they came to Norwich. Can I also congratulate the City Council for putting all the daffodils in the side of the roads? You come in from Mitchell's Road onto Hall Road, and it's just full with daffodils along the side. Crocuses going up Great Hill, crocuses coming in from other areas. Can I just say that Norwich actually do quite a lot? And I think the Green Party actually just criticises all the while. And what they really ought to do is get out and help us. I haven't seen anyone come to Norwich in Bloom and help Norwich in Bloom. It's a charity organisation where members can. You may be, yes, you are a member, Sandra. I remember giving you the joining fee, so I did attend for Ben as well. But there's a lot of work to be done, and there's a lot to be done over the years. So can I just say that you've got Danby Woods, you've got the plantation gardens, you've got Kets stuff like this as well, and they're all supported by Norwich City Council. So can I just say, well done, Norwich, and hope we win a gold award when we get back to the judges coming around again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other councillors wish to contribute? Councillor Stutley.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Driver. I agree with all those comments, and it's timely actually that I was going to suggest to councillors that they can get involved with this by taking part in projects within their communities, as we've done in Town Close with the St Stephen's Square, Somerleyton Gardens and Globe Place community gardens, and lots more to follow. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Any late pollinators? No? Okay. Councillor Packer, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Lord Mayor, I think Councillor Graham was indicating.
Oh, sorry, wait a minute. My apologies if that's the case. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Price, for noticing. I just wanted to say that I've been reading the SDP agenda today, and one of the things on it is an agreement that we're considering with other councils, and I'm bringing it up now because one of the things that that agreement commits us to as a shared aim is to develop a food tech industry. I haven't got the reference right now, but the emphasis is all on food tech, pesticides, chemicals, not a mention of conservation agriculture, pollinators, or any of that. So I would really like a copy of Councillor Huntley's speech to read to our partners when they're considering the food aspects of their industrial strategy. And I hope that Cabinet, that the SDP and Cabinet will bear this in mind when we're looking at that agreement. That's just one of several details, but we're talking about acting holistically. So let's practice what we're preaching. Thank you.
Thank you. And is that it? Have I missed anyone else? No? Okay. We get back to Councillor Packer. Would you like to respond now then?
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to all councillors for your words on this motion. I have to say, though, it does sadden me slightly that Councillor Price referred to this motion, I believe, as being a small aspect. I feel also that there are a number of points which Councillor Bergerlein raised, which I would like to respond to. Firstly, I disagree with Councillor Bergerlein over her criticism of the creation of the biodiversity strategy in terms of its timing. This is a piece of work which requires engagement with staff across all departments. Over the last year, many staff have been pulled directly from their teams into frontline COVID response work, which obviously makes it more difficult to prepare forward-looking strategies. I feel also I need to remind critics this evening that the last year has not been business as usual for the City Council. Our officers have faced the greatest challenge. Projects and works have had to be delayed whilst we focus on battling COVID. Since late 2019, our environmental manager has been working on a number of aspects of the environmental strategy and on funding bids to improve our environmental performance, so there is work ongoing. I also disagree with Councillor Bergerlein about her claim of electioneering. This motion was delayed due to COVID-19 and now is an appropriate time for it. I'd also counter that one could think that Councillor Bergerlein's question to me earlier about Ely Street tonight could be considered electioneering. Why, rather than coming directly to me about an issue, would it be considered better to wait until the last council meeting before elections to raise it? That said, I do thank councillors for their words of support. I hope that all councillors feel able to support this motion and look forward to all of the good that can and will be achieved to protect our pollinators. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. We'll now move to the vote. All those against? Okay. Abstentions? All those in favour? That's carried, thankfully, on behalf of all pollinators. Okay. As we're about almost at the 3-hour mark for this meeting, I need to take a vote on whether members wish to continue with the meeting. All those against continuing with the meeting?
Could you just explain whether that only refers to unopposed business or whether that refers to all business and it will then be delayed to June?
All remaining business. So, all those against continuing the meeting? Show of hands. Okay. Any abstentions? Oh, wait a minute. Against? We're still against. We got that? Got the number? Oh, you're not conferring, are you? The hands are going up left, right, and centre now. Yeah. If this goes through, the final two motions will go through in June. You understand? Okay. So we got those show of hands. Okay. Right. Abstentions? We got that? Yep. And all those in favour of continuing the meeting? Yes, you voted to close the meeting. Okay. Yeah, before we actually close, Councillor Waters would like to say a few words.
So, Lord Mayor, at the end of a long evening, I have to say you are an exceptional Lord Mayor in two ways. The first way is that you are the first Lord Mayor in many a year, perhaps probably 80 or 90 years, who has served as Lord Mayor and chaired this council 2 years running. And you're exceptional in the way that you have chaired these meetings, both in the days which seem like more than a year ago when we were in the council chamber together. You chaired the meetings very effectively there, but you have done exceptionally well to negotiate the challenges that we all face with virtual meetings and Zooming and muting and unmuting and crackly Wi-Fi and so on. And you've done it with a measured temperament, a calming influence that's enabled us to get through the business at each of our full council meetings. So on behalf of all of us, thank you very much for chairing council, making sure the business gets done, and making sure that we do it in a well-tempered, generally, but largely well-tempered way by following your example.
Your kind words. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure and a privilege. Thank you. A good night. Stay safe.